I bought this book with the goal of looking up and memorizing every single word that I didn't know, and it worked, and it taught me thousands of words. However, I continued on to reading this book with the goal of looking up as few words as possible, and that helped me get comfortable with the language. The theory behind intensive language immersion is that just like a hammer and chisel can sculpt a rock, studying can shape you to understand a foreign language via directed and focused effort. But there's another way to craft something beautiful out of stone. Extensive language immersion is like a rock in a river. With enough water flowing by, a rock can have beautiful curves carved into its shape. And with enough of the right language input and activities, your mind can be crafted in just the same way. Let me tell you a bit of my story and explore how these two methods can help you build skills in a language. With both languages where I have a higher degree of fluency, I was fortunate to have decided to spend time with both intensive immersion and extensive immersion. As a complete beginner, I began watching all German interviews from the Easy German channel, where a 10-minute interview might take me an hour to fully dissect and get through. But at the same time, I also started listening to all German podcasts from Die Zeit, with content pouring into my ears using words that I didn't understand. Yes, I was doing both of these activities when my total vocabulary was under 100 words, despite the fact that there were thousands of words in every single piece of content that I didn't know. Without knowing it at the time, both of these methods of intensive and extensive learning were helping me in key ways and bypassed a lot of the frustration that I experienced in language classes. Intensive learning is a focused, detailed approach to reading, watching, or speaking. You make sure you understand every word and every grammar structure. Not knowing something is your enemy. In a word, intensive immersion is studying. Extensive learning, on the other hand, is all about volume. You go through a lot of material for general understanding or familiarity without getting bogged down on every detail. Most language classes are 99% intensive learning, which is how most people are introduced to learning a second language. But these classes also have the double, triple, and quadruple whammy of being based on content that is boring and dull and useless. And while extensive learning might be slower on the detailed comprehension that intensive learning provides, the activities can be a lot more engaging. That could be things like watching a show or listening to a podcast, pausing as infrequently as possible, or it could be having a conversation regardless of what your skill level is, not focused on improvement. You know, like a human. In a perfect world, intensive learning would give you the tools to master a language and be fun. But we don't live in a perfect world, and studying like that isn't fun. So the question is, what activities give you the benefits of intensive and extensive learning? Well, finding the right tools is a great way to start, and Lingopie, the sponsor of today's video, is a great resource for watching and listening to content in another language. As I take hobbies more seriously, I'm constantly looking for ways to help me do more of the things that I love, which is how Lingopie came up on my radar for language learning. Lingopie is a streaming platform built from the ground up for language learners with a range of content if you're just starting out or if you're looking for something more advanced. Quality and entertaining content delivered with features designed for language learning is hard to come by, but that's where Lingopie delivers. They now have 11 languages supported within the platform itself, thanks to the recent additions of Dutch and Turkish. And where the platform really stands out is its integrations with Netflix and Disney+. That gives you an even bigger content library to explore intensive and extensive immersion. You can choose if you want subtitles or dual language subtitles or no subtitles, and these are responsive and non-obtrusive. So you watch, you look up a word if you want, and then you keep watching. And you're only one click away from a note card for any of the words that you do look up, so it makes the learning experience that much better. Plus, if you're a reader, their curated short stories share all of these same features just in an audiobook format. And they also recently launched a TV app for Roku, Google, and Amazon Fire TV. If tools like this built for comprehensible input match your learning goals and you want to support a company enabling language learning creators, Lingopie is offering a 7-day free trial and a hefty 55% off of their annual plan. Links are in the description and the pinned comment down below, and a big thank you to Lingopie for partnering on this. The journey towards fluency has a few goals that transcend any activity in a language. Everyone cares about understanding and proficiency, and then even if it's a long-term goal, people care about comfort and effortlessness in a language. And everyone gets something from learning the language, whether that's value or entertainment. That could be in connecting with others, watching TV shows and movies, or integrating into a new society or finding a new job. You work towards each of these meta goals through a variety of activities, but intensive learning really focuses on that understanding and proficiency. And it works especially well in the short term if you can stomach it. But, and this is a big but, extensive immersion helps you develop comfort and effortlessness in a language and facilitates inherently more valuable and enjoyable experiences with a language. And that's because very few people are studying just for studying's sake. Hopefully you can also see where I'm going with this, that to progress in a language, you need to balance the type of activities that build your understanding, build your intuition, and also address why you started learning a language in the first place. Now onto the activities. Like always, our 4 buckets are reading, watching and listening, writing, and speaking. Here's a sampling of activities and the skills that they train so you can plan out your months and years long process of improving. Intensive immersion activities are those where you take your time to understand everything your mind can. You should aim for 95% comprehension and retention. Outside of a class, that's reading and looking up every single word or grammar structure that you don't know, and maybe even making note cards in Anki as you go. Doing a dedicated listening session where you sit down to listen to a podcast and hear and understand every single word. You might transcribe as you go or do shadowing to practice your pronunciation alongside. It's you doing grammar drills in a textbook or writing a formal essay. It's having a language tutor to serve as the correctional guardrails for your conversation practice. You may spend an hour or 2 in a class reading passages in a book and then writing what you think about it. For intensive activities, by the time that you're done with them, you might be underwhelmed by how much ground you've covered, but you're also probably surprised by how much useful information you've learned. You go through 100 words and you understand 100 words and how they work together, technically and grammatically and phonetically and spiritually. What? Across these intensive activities, you're probably growing your vocabulary, you're expanding your understanding of grammar, and you're also improving the accuracy and the precision of your output in speaking and writing. These are high friction, high mental load activities where you're trading your effort for focused understanding. And then we've got the extensive immersion activities, which are focused on the sheer volume of time that you spend and the contact that you have with the language. This is watching a show with subtitles, trying to rely on visual cues and pausing as infrequently as possible. It's you reading a book that's just beyond your level and limiting yourself to looking up only one word every paragraph or every page so that you just keep reading. It's you doing the dishes while listening to a podcast in your target language, even as a beginner, where you're acclimating yourself to the sound of the language and you count it as a win every time you do recognize a word. It's you journaling just for fun or doing a language exchange in a pressure-free environment where the goal is so that you just keep talking and, hey, it happens to be in your target language. At the end of a session of extensive immersion, you're surprised by how much time you've spent with this new language, and you're also excited that, hey, maybe there were 5 new words that really clicked. The key is you're letting your mind get acclimated to the new language by only using 10% of the brain power you'd need for intensive activities, but you're doing it 10 times the immersion. In a single session like this, you might have 10,000 words go by, and you can be proud of the same 100 that you're able to learn through a session like this. Plus, you also get more ineffable parts of a language. You get more comfortable, whether that's with words or the music of the language. You're able to slowly train your mind to operate at speed in the language. And plus, these extensive activities are in general much more enjoyable. These are lower friction, lower mental load activities where you're trading your time for a growing sense in the language. The magic of progress and enjoyment is in balancing both types of activities. For many people, learning a language can be exclusively focused on intensive learning, which is done in a class, which can lead to language burnout. And there are other people who fumble extensive immersion because they're watching a show and then they focus too much on the content and nothing on the language, or they might focus too much on the language without taking cues from the show to also just enjoy what they're watching. You can use any balance of activities that will work for you going forward. For me, it's probably 75% extensive to 25% intensive. Or if you prefer, you can raise your baseline to somewhere in the middle to intensive immersion, where you're doing more lookups or getting more corrections than is ideal, but it's still tolerable. And yes, a period of intensive immersion, like in a class, can lay a good foundation to enable you to do more extensive learning. Balancing both is still very important. Plus, as you get more confident and your skills grow, what you used to call intensive activities slowly move into the extensive column here. And that is a very rewarding moment when you reflect on your growth. When I first opened Harry Potter in German, it took my wife and I 40 minutes to read the first 2 paragraphs of the book. It's 6 sentences. I slowed her down enough that it took us 6 minutes for each sentence. My pride aside, going through that intensive activity means that the words hinüberspähen and Bohrmaschine are firmly lodged in my memory. And doing that intensive reading for the rest of the first book meant that I slowly built the momentum to eventually read the 3,000 pages in books 2 through 7 as largely extensive, enjoyable reading. The key has been alternating between intensive and extensive reading, and the same thing goes for watching and listening, and I'm also working on speaking, and you can too. I'm particularly curious on this video, so please do leave a comment with what your experience has been, especially for extensive immersion. That's all for this one. Check out this video if you like this type of content, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more, and I'll catch you in the next one.